It was late summer in Atlanta, Georgia, the kind of season where the heat clung to the pavement and kids rushed outside to soak up the last days before school resumed. The neighborhood of Willow Creek looked picture-perfect at first glance. Two-story homes lined up nicely, American flags swaying gently from porches, and freshly mown lawns that smelled of cut grass and gasoline. But behind the manicured hedges and neighborly smiles lived a tension that the Wilson family could feel every single day. They were one of the few black families in this mostly white upper-middle-class community. While some neighbors nodded politely, others avoided eye contact, whispering in hushed tones after the Wilsons passed by. Subtle, quiet, but sharp, the kind of racism that didn't scream but cut just as deep. The Wilson family had just moved in 6 months earlier. Marcus Wilson, the father, was a tall, broad-shouldered black man with kind eyes that had seen too much of life's hardships. He worked long shifts at the post office, often leaving before dawn and returning just in time for dinner. His wife, Angela Wilson, was a proud black woman in her late 30s with a strong presence, though most of the neighbors barely knew her beyond quick nods at the grocery store, carried herself with quiet dignity. A striking black woman with a presence that commanded respect, she worked as a community liaison for the city. Many who underestimated her were always caught off guard by her intelligence and authority. Their only child, Jaden Wilson, was just 13, a lanky, athletic kid with endless energy. He loved sneakers, video games, and basketball more than anything. He wasn't the type to stir trouble. His biggest dream was to play varsity ball one day and maybe, just maybe, earn a scholarship. But to the wrong eyes, none of that mattered. All some people saw was his skin color. On that Saturday afternoon, Jaden rolled his basketball out to the driveway, dribbling rhythmically until the sound blended with the chorus of cicadas in the trees. Sweat glistened on his forehead as he practiced free throws, his laughter echoing across the cul-de-sac each time he made a perfect shot. For Jaden, the driveway hoop was freedom. It was where he felt safe, where he could pretend he was on an NBA court, where the weight of being a black boy in a white neighborhood melted away. But across the street, Karen Miller didn't see joy. She didn't see a child chasing his dreams. She saw a threat. Karen was in her 50s, a white woman who prided herself on being the eyes and ears of the neighborhood. Her blonde hair was always perfectly styled, her pearl necklace glistened even on casual afternoons, and her gossip was the lifeblood of every block gathering. To her, people like the Wilsons didn't belong. She never said it outright, but her actions spoke louder than words. Cold stares, complaints about too much noise, and passive-aggressive comments about property values. Watching Jaden dribble in the heat, Karen's eyes narrowed. Each bounce of the ball seemed louder, each laugh seemed sharper. In her mind, she convinced herself that the boy wasn't just playing. He was casing houses, maybe planning to steal. Her fear wasn't based on facts, but on prejudice, deeply ingrained and ready to spill out.
Inside her air-conditioned living room, Karen clutched her phone tightly. Her breath quickened as if she were in danger, though nothing had happened. Her words were frantic as she described a suspicious black teenager roaming the neighborhood. She exaggerated details, painting a picture of danger where there was only a boy and his basketball. On the other side of the street, Jaden's world was still carefree. He tossed the ball high, watching it swish through the net. He didn't know that at that very moment, his skin color was being weaponized against him. Minutes later, the faint sound of sirens began to grow. They started as a hum in the distance, but quickly turned into a piercing wail, cutting through the humid air. Jaden's ball slipped from his fingers as he turned his head, confused. Two police cruisers came speeding down the block, red and blue lights flashing against the white siding of the houses. Inside the Wilson home, Marcus dropped the remote and rushed to the window. His chest tightened. He knew this scene all too well. Angela, still in the kitchen, froze when she saw the flashing lights reflect across the room. The cruiser screeched to a halt in front of their driveway. Neighbors poured out onto their porches, drawn by the commotion. Phones were pulled out, whispers filled the air, and speculation spread like wildfire. Two officers stepped out, their posture tense, hands resting near their holsters. Their eyes locked on Jaden, who stood frozen in his driveway, basketball at his feet. His heart raced in confusion and fear. Marcus rushed outside, but the officers raised a hand, ordering him to stay back. Angela appeared behind him, her face pale with anger and dread. She wanted to shield her son, to explain, to stop this nightmare before it spiraled into uncontrol. And across the street, Karen Miller watched from behind her fence. Her lips curled into a satisfied smirk. In her mind, she had just protected her neighborhood. She had no idea that her actions were about to trigger a storm she couldn't possibly control. Jaden stood alone, a 13-year-old boy suddenly treated like a criminal in front of his entire neighborhood. His knees felt weak, his palms sweaty. He wanted to scream that he hadn't done anything wrong. But he remembered what his parents had taught him, how to act around the police, how to stay calm, how to stay alive. The neighbors whispered. Some believed Karen's story instantly. Others watched uncomfortably, but said nothing. That silence cut almost as deeply as the accusations. And then, just when the tension couldn't get any heavier, the officers began questioning Jaden. Their voices were sharp, suspicious. To them, he wasn't just a kid with a basketball. He was a suspect. But in a matter of minutes, everything was about to change. Because what the officers, the neighbors, and Karen didn't know was who exactly Angela Wilson really was. The flashing lights painted the Wilsons' quiet street in red and blue. Jaden's basketball rolled into the gutter forgotten as two officers loomed over him. Their hands hovered near their holsters, their voices sharp and clipped. ID, now. Jaden's voice cracked. I'm only 14. I don't have one. The officers exchanged a glance with their partner. One smirked, the other frowned.
To them, it didn't matter. He was tall, dark-skinned, and in their eyes, old enough to be a threat. Jaden's chest heaved, his knees wobbled, but he kept his hands in the air like his father had taught him years ago. Always keep your hands where they can see them, son. Across the street, Karen Miller folded her arms, her smirk widening. She leaned toward another neighbor and whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear.
Marcus stood on the porch, his body trembling, not with fear, but with a rage so deep it made his stomach twist. His son, his boy, was being treated like a criminal on his own property. His mind spun with memories, being frisked outside his first job just because he fit the description. Watching his cousin dragged into a police car at 17 and never truly recovering. His father warning him, "One day, Marcus, they'll look at your skin before they look at your soul." And now history was repeating itself. He wanted to run to Jaden, to pull him into his arms and shout the truth into these officers' faces. But he knew the risk. One wrong move, one raised voice, one sudden step, and the story could end with tragedy. So he stood frozen, fists clenched so hard his nails dug into his palms, whispering a prayer only God could hear.
The officers barked questions at Jaden. "Where's your ID? Who do you live with? Why are you here?" Tears welled in his eyes. His voice cracked as he said, "This is my house. That's my mom and dad right there. I was just playing basketball." But they didn't listen. One officer stepped closer, reaching toward Jaden's plucket. The boy flinched, terror flashing in his eyes. He thought of all the videos he had seen online, of black boys like him who never made it home. His throat tightened, his lips trembled, and his whole body shook. From the porch, Angela's eyes burned.
Angela had held herself back long enough. She knew how fragile these moments could be, how easily they could turn deadly. But watching her son tremble under their gaze, watching Karen sip her tea like it was a performance, was more than she could bear. Her heels struck the pavement like thunder as she descended the driveway. The murmurs of the crowd hushed instantly. "Officers," she said, her voice calm but icy, every syllable dripping with authority, "step away from my son." The officers turned, annoyed by the interruption. "Ma'am, step back. We're conducting an investigation." Angela's lips curved into the faintest smirk, not of amusement, but of someone who already knew she held the upper hand.
Slowly, deliberately, Angela reached into her handbag. Neighbors gasped. One officer's hand twitched toward his holster. But Angela's hand emerged holding something far more powerful than a weapon. A badge. A gleaming gold shield that caught the last rays of the evening sun and silenced the entire block. Angela Wilson wasn't just a mother. She wasn't just Marcus's wife. She wasn't just another black face in a white neighborhood. She was the chief of police. The officers froze. Their authority crumbled in an instant. Their radios crackled awkwardly as they stumbled back from Jaden, their bravado replaced by panic. The neighbors gasped. Some covered their mouths in shock. Karen's smirk vanished, replaced by a wide-eyed stare. The glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the driveway.
Angela stepped closer, her badge gleaming. Her eyes locked onto the officers, her voice calm but carrying the weight of thunder. "You just targeted the police chief's son in his own driveway. Tell me, what was his crime? Dribbling a basketball? Being black in your eyes?" The crowd fell into stunned silence. The officers stuttered, fumbling for excuses. "Ma'am, we were just responding to a call. We didn't know." Angela cut him off sharply. "You didn't need to know who he was. You just needed to respect his humanity." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors lowered their heads in shame. Others shifted uncomfortably, realizing how quickly they had believed Karen's story without question. Karen, pale as a ghost, tried to stammer, I didn't mean, I just thought." But Angela turned her gaze toward her, piercing and unflinching. Karen's excuses died in her throat. Jaden, once trembling with fear, now looked at his mother with awe. Relief washed over him. Pride filled his chest. He realized in that moment that his mom wasn't just his protector. She was a force no one in this neighborhood could ever underestimate again. And Marcus, his heart finally eased. For the first time that night, he unclenched his fists. Pride swelled in him as he watched the woman he loved turn humiliation into power.
The officers stammered like children caught in a lie. "Chief Wilson, we didn't know. We thought—" Angela's jaw clenched. She didn't raise her voice, but her words cut sharper than any scream. "You thought you could criminalize a child because of the color of his skin. That's what you thought." She leaned closer, eyes blazing. "And let me be perfectly clear. If you can't tell the difference between a threat and a child playing basketball, you have no business wearing that uniform." The officers swallowed hard, their faces pale. They tried to backpedal, mumbling about procedures and following up on a call. Angela straightened, towering in her presence. "You'll both report to my office first thing tomorrow. We'll discuss whether you deserve to keep those badges." The entire block gasped. The officers, stripped of their arrogance, shuffled back toward their cruiser like scolded schoolboys.
Karen Miller stood frozen, her face drained of color. Her tea glass lay shattered on the driveway, a puddle spreading like her dignity. She tried to laugh nervously. "Angela, I didn't mean any harm. I was just trying to look out for the neighborhood. You know how it is." Angela's eyes locked on her, calm but sharp. "Look out for the neighborhood, or look down on it." Karen's lips quivered. I just thought." Angela stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Karen could hear. "You didn't think. You assumed. You saw my black son and decided he didn't belong. You humiliated him. You endangered him. And for what? Your comfort?" Karen's knees nearly buckled under the weight of the truth. The neighbors who once nodded along with her bigotry now turned their gazes away in shame. Some even whispered words of apology to Marcus and Jaden. The tide was shifting, and Karen stood alone, exposed and humiliated.
The Wilsons stood at the curb as the flashing red and blue lights finally faded into the distance. The night air was cold, but the silence from the neighbors felt colder. Every porch light in the cul-de-sac glowed, every curtain half pulled back, faces peeking out but not stepping forward. Marcus wrapped his arm around Angela's shoulder, steadying her trembling frame. Jaden clung to her hand, his small face a mix of fear and confusion. "Daddy, why did they think I was bad? I didn't do nothing."
Marcus knelt in front of him, his large calloused hand gently resting on his son's cheek. His deep voice cracked with pain. "Because sometimes, son, people see your skin before they see your heart. And that ain't fair. But tonight, we showed them you will never be broken." Angela's eyes filled with tears. She bent down, pressing her forehead to her son's. "You're not the problem, baby. Hate is, and we'll never let it win."
From her porch, Karen's arms were crossed tight over her chest, but her face, flushed red and twisted with embarrassment, betrayed the fear underneath. She had expected applause from the neighbors, support for protecting the block. Instead, all she got was silence. A man from across the street muttered just loud enough, "Always stirring trouble." Another neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, shook her head, saying to her husband, "That poor boy. Imagine being treated like that in front of the whole neighborhood." Karen snapped, "Don't look at me like that. I was just protecting us. You don't know what it's like. What if he was dangerous?" Angela's head snapped toward her, fire in her eyes. She stepped forward slowly, her voice low but sharp as glass. "Dangerous? He's 14 years old. He had a basketball, not a weapon. But you didn't see a child. You saw a threat, and that's your sickness, not ours." Karen faltered, her mouth opening and closing with no defense.
A few neighbors finally stepped closer. Mr. Jenkins, a retired teacher, spoke up, his voice steady but disappointed. "Karen, enough. We've lived here 20 years. That boy's been nothing but polite every time he came by. You crossed a line tonight." Another woman, holding her daughter's hand, nodded. "Calling the police on a child, that's not protecting the neighborhood. That's endangering him. You could have ruined his life for no reason." Whispers turned into murmurs. Mistrust, once aimed at the Wilsons, shifted toward Karen. She looked around, realizing the block she thought she controlled was slipping from her grip. Her lips quivered. "You're all blind. You'll see one day. They don't belong here." But no one answered. Not this time. Jaden, who had been clutching Angela's hand tightly, suddenly stepped forward. His little voice shook, but it carried across the quiet street. "I just wanted to play ball. That's it. I don't know why you hate me, but I'm not leaving. This is my home, too." The boy's words cut through the night sharper than any adult's argument. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was crushing. Some neighbors turned their faces away, ashamed. Others stared at Jaden, the weight of his innocence pressing down on their guilty consciences. Angela knelt again, tears streaming down her cheeks.
She pulled her son into her arms. "You're braver than all of them put together. Don't ever let them take your light, baby."
Marcus turned to the crowd, his deep voice carrying across every porch. "We didn't move here for handouts. We didn't move here to cause trouble. We came here for the same reason all of you did. For peace, for family, for a future. But tonight showed us something. Hate can live anywhere, even behind picket fences and porch lights." He paused, his gaze locking on Karen before sweeping across the rest of the block. "But hear this, we will not be chased out. We will not be shamed. This is our home, and our roots will grow deeper than your hate ever could." With that, he took Angela's hand. Jaden held tightly to her other hand, and together they walked back toward their house. Their steps were slow but strong, heads high, shoulders unbroken.
Karen remained frozen on her porch, arms wrapped around herself. The neighbors she once commanded with whispers and fear now avoided her gaze. Some shook their heads, some turned their backs entirely. Her glass of wine, forgotten on the porch railing, slipped and shattered at her feet. She jumped at the sound, but didn't move to clean it. Her power was gone. Angela glanced back once, her eyes locking with Karen's. No words were exchanged, but the message was clear. Karen had lost.
And so the Wilson family returned to their home, not with wealth, not with revenge, but with something far more powerful: dignity. The neighbors had witnessed the truth with their own eyes. They saw how quick hate could destroy, and how strong love could stand against it. That night wasn't just about a boy with a basketball. It was about a community forced to confront its own reflection. And in that reflection, hate looked small. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in riches or courts. It's in surviving, thriving, and refusing to bow to hate. The Wilsons had nothing to prove, but they left the block with one undeniable truth: dignity can't be stolen, and family will always outshine prejudice. Jaden, once trembling with fear, now looked at his mother with awe. Relief washed over him. Pride filled his chest. He realized in that moment that his mom wasn't just his protector. She was a force no one in this neighborhood could ever underestimate again. And Marcus, his heart finally eased. For the first time that night, he unclenched his fists. Pride swelled in him as he watched the woman he loved turn humiliation into power.